Hi and welcome back to Linux Goodies. My name is Tom. I'm a system administrator for 25 years now, and recently, 2 years ago, I quit Windows and went to my favorite operating system now on a desktop basis, which is Linux. And in the last video we talked about how to install WinSCP on a Linux system quite easily. This is Manjaro, and you can do that on any system as you wish. Let's now talk about the differences between SCP and SFTP and why you don't need a front end for SCP on a Linux system. The understanding is that you can transfer files on a Linux system on the command line via SCP quite easily. More easily if you have the keys of the system transferred so that you do not need to log in somewhere. I have a system which is called my mail system, and it resides under this IP address. It has the it managed my email for me, so we can use this as a test. Here is the file WinSCP from my previous video, which we downloaded, and now we copy that via SCP to the other system. Let's do that. I want to copy WinSCP exe to Tom, that's my username, at the other system, which is this one, and I want to separate this with a colon so I can say in which directory it should copy that. And with a tilde I say copy that to my home directory. So I say go, now it wants my password, I put it in and it will transfer it. As easy as that. What you don't know is that on the other side of this system there is no FTP server, which means that the SSH installation or the SSH server on my mail system does all the transferring without an FTP server. So if you want to do that the same thing with SFTP, and that's quite easily doable, but not in such an easy way as with SCP, because SCP was developed to do exactly what we just did. One command on the command line to transfer the files. With SFTP, you cannot do that easily because it's a client to a server. And we connect to that server right now. You see that it asks the same, it asks for my password, and this is the FTP server in the SSH installation on my mail server. And you see here, there is the WinSCP we just copied. If we want to copy it again, we use put, and then it automatically chooses the file on my local system here. And we can just say put, it will transfer it, done. The speed you see here is meaningless because I use Wi-Fi here, so it doesn't mean anything. There can be someone else using the Wi-Fi right now, so you get a difference in speed. It's of no concern to you, this speed right now, because on a landline or on a if you are connected with a cable, it's the same speed. I tried that. So that's the difference. If you want to use WinSCP for that as a GUI, so that you have a front end, a visual front end to do that, that's all okay, but you can also use Filezilla. And Filezilla says here, wait just a second, download and upload files via FTP, FTPS and SFTP. People are searching for Filezilla and SCP. You don't need SCP on Filezilla. That's why it comes without it. You don't need that because you can easily do all that with Filezilla. The SFTP protocol is something different than the file transfer protocol, FTP. You see here SSH file transfer protocol, and the other one is file transfer protocol. If I choose that and say, let's do that FTP over TLS, a secure connection, and we do that on the same server. As I told you before, there is no FTP server on that server. I can try to connect and it says could not connect to server. because on the other side there is no FTP server. And all what SCP does is copying or using the SSH backend on my mail server. So if we use then SFTP, I don't give a port because it doesn't matter, and say connect, you will see, bam, it's connected immediately, and here is the WinSCP file we just transferred. We can do that again, easily like that, and say replace. That's it. So I hope when you come from Windows or want to have an SCP client that you understand that it's only really needed on the command line when you do not have a graphical representation of all your or a desktop system. Then SCP is the tool you want to do if you go and want to share a backup between servers or whatever. That's how it will be done. If you want to use a GUI, use Filezilla. Move your WinSCP data to Filezilla. I know it's a bit of work, but you can do that gradually like I did. I first used WinSCP2, installed that, used that, and then found out that Filezilla is just easier to use natively instead of when you screw up your Wine installation and try different things. You want to have that native installation of an FTP client. There is no need to buy anything or, I don't know, purchase a program which does SCP, because of SSH is handling all of that, SFTP and SCP. I hope that helped. If you like these videos or consider subscribing, give it a thumbs up, and of course leave a comment if that helped you or if you want to know more. As you hear, I'm not a native English speaker, and for that I also have head cold right now, which is really convenient to start a YouTube channel. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that helped you, and see you later. Bye bye.